Hey, I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, the original holistic pet health coach. I am super excited because with me today is Tania Bachesais, and I'm saying this right.
You
Finally,
got
I've
it
been
right.
practicing.
Good
Oh, thank God, the
job.
third time's a
Good job.
charm. My brain is just a little fried on language these days. But if you don't know Tania, who is one of our graduate holistic pet health coaches, her business is called Healthy Paws and Whiskers. You ought to, because she had been working in the IT industry for 25 years, but found the passion to provide more natural and holistic approaches when her border collie came down with hemangiosarcoma, which is a heartbreaking cancer. She and her family tried everything to give him the best quality of life. And during that process, she learned a lot and wanted to share that with others. Her passion in helping your animals live a long, healthy life really shines through in everything she's doing. Her goal is to help you navigate through all the information that's out there and help you make holistic decisions for your animals. She's currently living with her 3 dogs and her husband, and everything is hunky dory at the moment. So, Tania, welcome. You are one of the best researchers that I know. And in our coaching calls, you've always got questions, which I absolutely love, and you keep me on my toes. So, welcome.
Thank you.
And what it's my pleasure. What we're going to talk about today is pretty timely because it's starting to get warmer in the U.S. We're starting to see some mosquitoes in the southeast in particular, and a lot of folks are like, "Oh, heartworm, is that still a thing?" And yes, it really is. So one of the things that I think is important to understand is what are some signs that a dog or a cat might have heartworms. So if you could kind of kick off with that, that would be awesome.
Sure. So usually a mild, persistent cough around exercise. So, some sort of exercise intolerance, difficulty exercising, reluctancy to exercise, any fatigue after some moderate activity, lethargy, decreased appetite, weight loss. I mean, some of those are items that you see with other diseases, but I think it's really the cough that would be something that you'd want to look for.
Right on. And I think one of the things we might want to talk about too, because this is the really confusing thing about heartworm, is the life cycle of the heartworm. And that's like boring but important. So if we think about that, how do dogs and cats get heartworms? Where do they come from?
So they come from mosquitoes, and it's actually interesting when you start to look at the heartworm cycle. So it takes, first of all, i- in order to have a mosquito that has heartworm in it, it takes about 2 weeks. So that mosquito would have to bite an infected dog, and then mature enough to bite another dog in about 2 weeks for that heartworm to actually get passed on. So when we look at temperatures are important. So we're looking for the temperatures to rise above 57 degrees for about 2 weeks. And that's because if it falls below that threshold, it will actually kill the heartworm, the mosquito that causes the heartworm. Sorry. So, it is really important to look at that life cycle.
Right on. And really what happens is it once those temperatures get above that 55 or 57 degree mark, then the heartworm larvae can mature inside the mosquito and then become infected. So it's very interesting, and it's hard because almost all of my conventional colleagues are like, no, give the heartworm prevention every month year round. And that's not really, I mean, actually the science doesn't support that, and even the American Heartworm Society doesn't say that. So if we use that
And
60, 55 or 57 degrees, then how often might people need to give heartworm prevention?
6 months, depending on your area. So there are heartworm maps out there that actually shows you when you can start the heartworm and when you can end the heartworm. And so I'm in the Midwest, and ours is June through November. So, when you're in a warmer climate, such as Florida or Texas, it might be 11 months. But you can stagger those if you're doing the traditional heartworm medications every 45 days due to that life cycle. So, the way the traditional heartworm medications work is they actually kill everything from the time you give it until the last time that it was given. So, that allows for that 45-day period. And the pharmaceutical companies actually would like you to give it every 30 days because then you're giving it more often. And they're obviously, getting you to buy it more often because of that. So,
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the whole compliance issue. And I think that's critical to understand. Most people think you give the heartworm pill and it sticks around and kills forward, if you will, but really it's backtracking.
Yep.
And the preventives are typically gone out of the system for the most part within 24 hours to 48 hours. And the other thing I think that's really critical for people to realize too is like when you're doing these heartworm tests, how long. So if we get a negative test, then what does that actually mean?
It's negative from the time that they do the test 6 months backwards. So again, it's a backwards test. It's not a forwards test.
Right on. And that's critical to understand. So
Yeah.
it takes so long for these things to develop and go through the life stage.
Well,
So
and it's
if
heartworm
Mhm.
disease is actually a slow killing disease. So you do have time to react if your dog comes down with heartworm. So um, you know, I am in rescue, and rescue we do get hit with a lot of cases that are horrible, and for pets that have been, abused and not been well treated. And so like their heartworm could be at the very later stages, so we don't have as much time to do it. But for a responsible pet parent, if they're testing twice a year, they're going to get a good gauge on what's going on with their dog.
Right on. And if they're doing that, how likely is it they'll actually develop symptoms from the heartworm?
Unlikely if they're testing every 6 months. They're going
Right
to see
on.
it on tests versus symptoms of their dog.
Right on. And so I think that's another critical thing to remember. So when we're talking about the preventions, there's a myriad of chemical, pharmaceutical ones out there, and there's some alternatives as well. So let's talk about that a little bit, um, and how you would support heartworm prevention on a more holistic tact. Let's start with that part.
Sure. So I'm going to take it slightly off topic for a second here, because nutrition is at the very source of everything. And so if the dog isn't being fed in a species appropriate diet, and when I say that, I don't mean kibble. So, cooked or raw, do it yourself, pre-made, I don't care, just no kibble. You need to start with a good diet. And a well-fed, species appropriately fed dog is going to be less resistant to any kind of heartworm or flea or tick, any kind of bugs, right? So they're going to have a stronger immune system. They're going to have a stronger body. They're not going to have these diseases that you hear about on a daily basis.
Right on, right on. And I think that's critical. Like if you're feeding Doritos, the kibble version of Doritos to dogs and cats, really, is that gonna? I mean, that cannot help the immune system to do its job, and that's so critical.
Yeah, I mean, you and I don't eat McDonald's every single day, so we don't want to feed our pets McDonald's every single day, and that's what I always.
No, I would die.
I know. Well, I can't stand eating it just any day of the week versus
Yeah,
every day of
yeah,
the week.
right on.
Um,
So, all right, so now we've got
okay.
the diet dialed in, and
Yep.
then what?
So we want to try and prevent the mosquitoes from actually biting. So some sort of an essential oil spray will help that. So that's one thing that I will do. So Wonderside, Cedarside, Kin and Kind, Project Suds. I mean, there's like a ton of them out there. And that's what I use to try and prevent the mosquitoes from biting. And then internally, I use a product called Amber Naturals, HWF, Clean Heart. And that's dosed every other week. So week on, week off, week on, week off during heartworm season.
Cool. And do you have trouble with making sure that your dogs are taking that, or it's not too big of a deal?
My dogs eat it fine in their food. I haven't had any kind of problems with that. But if you were, you always want to dose supplements separately if your dogs are having problems taking them. That way, they're not associating it with their feeding time, because they will refuse food if they don't like the supplements that are going into it. So, if you can give it away from the food, it's actually better for them, in case they don't like it.
Right on, because that's the last thing we want to do is get them turned off on what they're eating. So,
Correct.
yeah, I think we tend to want to go forward with boatloads of supplements and then not so good
A
in
healthy
terms
dog
of
doesn't really need a whole lot of supplements, if their bodies are performing like they should be. So,
right on,
you know, if they're on the right diet, they shouldn't really need a whole lot of supplements.
right on. And yeah, exactly. So, all right, now we've got some sort of natural options. Let's talk a little bit about the pharmaceutical approach and kind of what, if you're worried that, oh, the natural stuff isn't going to work, what are some approaches people could take to help limit any possible side effects from these things?
So you want to look at the ones that are single chemical, single ingredient, um, just for heartworm. And so, really, what you're looking at is plain interceptor, not interceptor plus, and then ivermectin, which your vet would actually have to dose for you. It used to be HeartGuard, but they no longer sell plain HeartGuard. So now they just do HeartGuard Plus, which does have more chemicals in it for deworming and stuff like that. If
Yeah,
you want to take it up one notch, you could go to Sentinel, plain Sentinel, not Saint. I think it's Sentinel Spectrum. You want to avoid that one. And that one also has a flea birth control in it. So you could do that if you're really worried. And a lot of times I'll tell pet parents, like, if you're worried, start here. Start with the lower dosed, single chemical options, and then detox your pet for the week that you give that. And make sure you're giving it 45 days. Don't give it every 30. So even by giving it 45 days, you're limiting the amount that's going in them and only dosing it during that heartworm season that we talked about earlier. So all that really does reduce the amount of chemicals that are going into your dogs.
and I think that's it. I mean, what the interesting thing is I heard a talk last June about intestinal parasite resistance, and so I asked the presenter, you know, why are we still having all of these anti-intestinal parasitic drugs combined with heartworm prevention? And he just hung his head and shook it, because what we've done by giving these every 30 days, if you were following your vet's directions, is created resistance to these drugs. And so one of the more common ones, pyrantyl pamoate, is just literally the hookworms and roundworms just are non-responsive to it. And then what about the trio, like Simparica trio?
No. You want to avoid anything that says plus, anything that says trio, anything that can be used for ticks, because any of the chemicals that are being put in there for ticks are a neurotoxin. And so these are the worst offenders. These are the ones that are going to cause seizures and even worse, death. So, I have a seizure dog myself. I have to avoid a lot of things for him in order to keep him healthy. So absolutely not.
Yeah. And the thing with trio too is it's a heartworm prevented, but it's also an oral flea and tick medication, and that stuff is not so good.
Once it's in their body, it's hard to get it out. So, I mean, that brings
Yeah,
that the 6-month, what's the name of that product? The 6-month
yeah,
and the 12
the
month
injection. Yeah, the
injectables.
Pro
Yes.
Heart.
Yeah, the Pro
Mm-mm.
Heart. Yeah. I mean, that one isn't isn't great at all because, I mean, that
No,
that one's even harder to get out of them, to detox them if they have issues.
right. And I really don't understand how that product got back on the market. It was withdrawn, I think in like 98, 99, 2000 maybe, because it was creating so many side effects and frankly deaths. So they reformulated it and got it back on the market, and there's still it's still a problem. So, yeah, Lisa's got a good question too. Can she get a vet to prescribe just ivermectin alone? Um, and this gets a little tough because vets want to just sell you what they've got on their shelves. But if your vet is open to a conversation and you've got a dog like Tanya's that's got seizures or some other major health condition going on, they may be willing to walk you through that conversation. Have you had success though with that with some of your rescue pups?
Uh, yeah, every time that we've asked for it, it's been okay. So you just have to have the right conversations with your vet in order to get it dosed. So it's all about having the right conversations, and you know, the vets are going to do what's best for them. And obviously, dosing that isn't as easy as giving them a pill. The other thing with ivermectin to point out is if your dog has the MDR1 variant, you really don't want to do ivermectin. You would go towards Interceptor because there
So
is
so
a
what's
reaction.
what's the MDR1 variant?
Um, the multi-drug resistance. It's prevalent in collies, German shepherds. I don't remember the other breeds that it's prevalent
Yeah,
in, but because I have border
Australian
collies,
shepherds.
Aussie,
Yeah,
yeah, Aussie.
yeah,
Because I have border
yeah.
collies, I'm very aware of the MDR1 variant.
Right on. And I think that is something that's really critical to look up. Um,
And
and
these DNA tests, if you get the DNA plus health, it automatically tests for that. So the wisdom panel, those type of test. So you can actually test it at home now. With my first dog,
oh,
I
that's
actually
cool.
had it tested at the vet and it was way expensive. And now, I could just do it on wisdom panel with the health certificate or the health piece of it to it.
Right on. So, Vanessa, what Tanya was mentioning is this HWF product, but it's made by Amber Naturals. It's a really um, interesting, interesting approach to doing that. So it's an herbal formula that's designed to help clean the uh, cardiovascular system and remove unwanted foreign invaders. So check that out on the website. Um, and I think that they've got really crystal clear instructions on that. And then
And they
Lisa's got
actually,
please.
they
Sorry.
actually did say that they could use it in cases of a heartworm infection. It's just dosed every week for that. So there's a maintenance dose on the website, and then forget what they call the actual heartworm infection, but they don't actually call it that. But for maintenance, it's 1 week on, 1 week off.
Cool. And then this is another great question too. So when you give one of the chemical or excuse me pharmaceutical approaches to heartworm prevention, what do you use after heartworm
Milk thistle.
prevention?
Yeah, you
Right
would
on.
use it. So if you give the heartworm treatment on Sunday, make sure you give milk thistle on that same Sunday and then dose it through Saturday, so 1 week.
Right on. Right on. So, and this is kind of our next topic to jump into. Pam's got a 12-year-old Maltese with a history of liver disease. So she's using a Flea Be Gone Tag Wondercide. Do you have any other recommendations for heartworm prevention, Pam, or for flea and tick stuff?
So is she asking for heartworm suggestion, or is she asking for more
Not
flea and tick?
not quite clear, but let's go down that flea and tick
Okay,
pathway since
sure.
because it's fun and it's also
Yeah, right,
appropriate for
right.
this time.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
So,
what
go
are
ahead.
your favorite options?
Yeah, so with any natural option, right, you can't just use one item. You have to use a layered approach. And so I like the fact that she was doing a tag and then also a spray. I might also add, I like the essential oils collars. So Wonderside has them, Only Natural Pet has them. There's a couple others out there too. So I'll add that in there. And then, obviously for heartworm, HWF. And then she didn't mention the diet that she's giving her dog. So I would want to know more about that. Garlic's another thing that you can add to their food to try and repel the fleas and ticks. Because again, bugs don't like garlic. Um, and when we talk about flea and tick specifically, we talk about protecting the pet, protecting the home, and then protecting the environment. So I'd want to know what she's doing in her home and then as well as in her environment. In the yard, we put down nematodes every year. If you're in warmer climates, you'd have to do it more often. But we do it in the spring and then sometimes in the fall. Those things are great. Little tiny microorganisms that eat all the larvae for you, so you don't have, a flea or tick problem. I plant peppermint and citronella in pots around my yard to repel all these bugs. There's a bunch of other plants that you can put in your yard to try and repel. So, rosemary, some of these are invasive, so please don't plant them
Pots are
actually in your
good.
yard. But I mean, catnip, lemongrass, basil, mint, sage are all things that you can plant in the yard. Um, Cedar chips. Cedar Side has cedar chips that you can buy, and I use those in the perimeter of the yard. So again, repelling the stuff that you don't want in your yard. Um, let's see. You can use a liquid garlic barrier also if you wanted to do it that way. Diatomaceous earth is another one that you could be using as a perimeter. I mean, there's so many things that you can be doing. Um, in the house, flea stoppers. Only Natural Pet also has a powder that you could use in your house to keep a problem at bay or get rid of a problem. Um, Diatomaceous earth is another thing that you can use in your home. A lot of these places, so Wonderside, Cedarside, Only Natural Pet, I mean, the names keep on popping back up, but they have yard sprays, they have house sprays, they have sprays that you put on your pets, they have sprays that you can put on the beddings. And all this stuff is the essential oils that will repel and actually will kill in some formulas the fleas that may be in your home. So
Sweet. I don't think you gave enough options there.
sorry. Well, there's so
No,
many. And like what works for me might not work for somebody else, right? So you kind of have to find your formula that works. But I mean,
right
these
on.
are things that I've used that work. I've seen them physically work.
Right on. And I think that's critical. So you're in Ohio, but Lisa, one of our colleagues, is in South Carolina. Sorry, Lori is Meganson is in South Carolina, and what she may have to do would be totally different. And I had a client that actually, I don't know how she got this rigged up, but she had a company that had set up perimeter sprays of cedar oil on the marsh. So she had her dog walled off literally with cedar oil. And so, but it worked really well. And she never had to use any of the chemical flea control stuff. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and we go
Yeah,
back and forth to North Carolina. So some of these things that I've mentioned, we've actually used in North Carolina. And so, I've had flea issues because we're close to the beach. So, it's it's been effective.
right on. And that's it. I mean, I think you're being really wise in planning for where you are and understanding the geographic differences in places. So I think, all right, so we've got the fleas covered, we've got some ticks covered. Are there, is there anything else you would do in terms of addressing? We've talked about diet, and Pam, good job. You're feeding fresh, gently cooked. That helps support the immune system. But is there anything else we could do to support gut health that might help the body be able to repel heartworm infections a little bit more efficiently and/or fleas and ticks?
Well, yeah, I mean, you want to pay attention to what's going on in your dog. So, I mean, if they're having allergy issues, if they're having ear infections, if they're having, some sort of issues, that all goes down to the gut. And I mean, you probably shake your head at me and go, "Well, it's his ears. What does that have to do with his gut? Like that doesn't make any sense to me." Well, all the research is showing that everything's going back to their gut, and so you want to heal the gut. You want to get them on something that works for them. And so, I really like the Glacier Peak Intolerance Test because it actually will test for issues with food as well as environmental issues, and then you can address those, right? So if the test comes back and it says that your dog has a sensitivity to chicken, well, don't feed your dog chicken. Like, let's get him off of that and let's get him onto something that actually works for him. And then let's heal the gut, right? So let's make the gut stronger so that when flea, tick, and heartworm season comes along, and if they get bit, they can handle it, right? Their body can get rid of the um, bugs that are invading them, as we like to say.
Right on. Right. And I think that's critical, right? Because we tend to think about taking action when we're in the heat of the moment versus a more long range um, plan to prevent issues from happening. And and that's part of why the coaches are here because we don't have true preventive medicine or preventive health being discussed by most of my conventional colleagues because, frankly, they just don't have time. But I think it is critical to start thinking about okay, my dog is 2. What are some things that he or she might experience as she gets older if I don't do anything to help prevent these issues from being issues? So, working on diet constantly, making sure that we're keeping the microbiome in optimal function is just critical. And this is what coaches can help you do. If you're like, holy smokes, my dog is 12, like Pam, and it sounds like your pup's pretty healthy, Pam, which is amazing. But maybe there's a little discomfort getting up and down, that kind of stuff. Starting when those issues are small problems are a whole lot easier than waiting until they are literally screaming in pain and unwilling to get up and down and move.
Yeah, the earlier that you can address the issues, the uh, more holistic that you can go, right? So, I mean, when they're screaming in pain, the holistic isn't going to work that second, right? And you really need to bring the dog some comfort, which may mean pharmaceuticals, but then, you work on it on the back end, trying to resolve it enough so that we can use something holistically and we can not have to go to the pharmaceutical. So, you know, trying to get it at the early stage, like you mentioned, is so key. I can't stress that enough. But I know sometimes it's hard with the the way we're all so busy right now, to even notice some of the things that are happening with your animals at the very start of it. So the balancing
Yeah,
act.
right on. And there's a couple of other questions about milk thistle. So um, Lisa and Tropical Tales, Tanya was talking about using milk thistle to help detox after having given a dose of heartworm prevention. And is this something that you use on a routine basis for your guys?
Yeah, so I
Just
mean,
to
we live in a very toxic world right now. And if you're not doing any sort of pharmaceuticals, from the vet for flea, tick, and a heartworm, then you really want to be detoxing your pet at least once a quarter. So using the milk thistle once a quarter for about a week is really a good idea. And if your dog is having more frequent issues, you can do it more frequently. But if there is no issues, that's the gauge that I usually use is every 3 months.
right on. And that's the thing that's interesting too. There's a lot of chronic disease that we are finding is associated with chronic toxicity. And so that's where, again, a holistic pet health coach can be super helpful because sometimes milk thistle just isn't quite enough to really take care of everything that may be present. Cool. Um, what else? What else is critical in helping make sure these bugs are not invading and taking over our pet's health?
I was trying to think about, other options, because again, treating the pet, treating the yard, treating the house. So continually thinking about those three items, I think will definitely help people understand what needs to be done. Don't just think about the dog and, doing an essential oil spray or something else on the dog. But I mean, you have to make sure that the yard is taken care of. You have to treat the house. One of the things that I saw that was kind of cool at one point was, and I've used it before too, is putting one of those cheap flea collars into the vacuums will actually kill any kind of fleas that are in your house. So if you do have some kind of flea issue in your house, we say that vacuum, 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 it's so important, but you don't want those things hatching in your vacuum bag. So, throwing a cheap flea collar in there has been helpful. Um, that's kind of a neat trick. Another neat trick was for ticks. Um, if you're going hiking in the woods, put on a white t-shirt on your dog. And so we've used baby t-shirts or kids t-shirts because they're a more appropriate size. That way you can see the tick that would be on your dog or it would, you know, not attach. When you get home, you can use a lint roller to actually get off any loose ticks that have wandered on your pet. And then just a good old fashioned flea comb has been so helpful. So when you're walking in the woods or walking outside and you come home, just use a flea comb through your dog. Um, and make sure you dip
That's
the flea comb into like a soapy bath so you actually kill the flea once you're done with it. But you know, the simple things sometimes make the biggest impacts.
that's brilliant. I really like the idea of using white T-shirts because it makes it so much easier to see these little buggers. So I think you're a tick pro or a tick
Well,
prevention pro.
I came down with Lyme disease in 2015, so it's something that I'm pretty passionate about. And if I can do it without any kind of pharmaceuticals, because like I said, anything for ticks is neurotoxin, so stay away from those. It's definitely something that people can do.
That's brilliant. Super easy. Yeah, Lyme is not a fun thing to deal with for sure. But I mean, you came through it with flying colors, and it sounds like you probably did a ton of digging to take care of yourself as well.
Yeah, it did take some some research to try and figure it out. So.
Right on. Have you found that to be chronic Lyme to be a big problem for dogs in your area?
I've only had one instance of it. And it was kind of interesting because her dog was having some of the same symptoms as I was having. And so we were kind of going through it together. So that was
Wow.
interesting. But no, I haven't really come across it a lot. Um, as I understand it, dogs can actually get rid of some Lyme in their systems, right? Um, as long as we go back to the diet, right? As long as they're being fed appropriately, they're healthy, they have the ability to get rid of a lot of things that we don't necessarily give them credit for.
Well, we don't really give our own immune systems credit for a lot of things too. And I think that's, we got into this habit of thinking about what healthcare is and not what preventive health is. So it's a tough one to relearn for sure.
Oh, exactly. And you're brought up that way to, think what kind of drug can I be given for this issue that I have right now?
Right on. Yeah, can I just get the pill for that, doc? Well, Tania, this has been a blast. For those of you that have got pets, that have got a more difficult set of health challenges they're dealing with, again, this is what the holistic pet health coaches are here for. So I've been dropping the link to where you can get in touch with Tania, hire her to support you, support your pet. I think Lori's right. You should do a whole webinar on this and show, and teach people how to do that program at home. Like, okay, if you're heading towards the coast, you may need these things, and sort of figure it out to go make it a little more specific for where they're living. So reach out to Tania. She can get you straightened out. Again, she is one of the best researchers in the graduates and has had a myriad of very peculiar cases, we'll just put it that way, come her way, and has really been amazing in terms of getting down to the last bit of information so that pet parent can support their pet better. So for all of you that joined us today, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Tania, thank you so much for joining us. And looks like this was a really helpful session for folks.
Great. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Good. Cool. All right. Y'all take good care. Ciao.